Right. So, Coach Helen for YouFit Studio. Today's live/podcast is about living for the weekend. It's a favourite of mine, and I'm going to kind of cross living for the weekend / holidays slash weekends away, weeks away. Because there's a lot of it happening right now, and I've had a couple of clients ask me for some advice prior to going, and also there tends to be a real extreme of behaviours while they are away or away for the weekend, and so just like yesterday's, this live was at a request of one of my clients who's like, just I don't know what's happening, Helen. I'm just blowing off so much steam. I can barely see through the weekend because I'm fully in the midst of partying. So okay, so let's have a chat about it and see it, and explain what's happening, and also just for people who are watching this to understand that it's not a solo affair, that it's quite common, and there is some psychology behind it. So what is living for the weekend? I touched on this a little bit earlier on, long time ago, way back in week 5. Helen talked about weekend behaviours. It's just like, it feels like Big Brother, doesn't it? Like the worst episode of Big Brother, week 5 in lockdown. I can't even do the accent. And Helen, week 5. Helen is talking about getting drunk at weekends. That was a bit Texan. Moving on. So what I'm tending to see, and what I saw during lockdown was a tendency to store up all the frustration and everything else for the weekend at one point. And then it's kind of gone into a nice, not a lull, I would say. I think people just found a balance with our support. And now, as we're kind of transitioning to positions where people are starting to go away for short little mini breaks in the UK, or away for weekends, etc., we're definitively seeing some behaviours come back in when it comes to taking time away from daily life, shall we say. It's almost like prior to lockdown, we would say that the daily grind that people were balancing on a big scale would probably be work. Let's be honest, it's usually work stress or personal stress, and actually getting to the weekends, a lot of people blow off steam. I think now what's really happening is that people's frustration at being indoors, certainly if you're central Leicester, and not being able to socialise with friends and family still in the way that you would like within your own home, means that there's a store up of emotion, if you like, or some degree of frustration that somebody only kind of knows. A percentage of people only know a particular way of letting out that steam or frustration, and it tends to be through food and or alcohol. And by that I mean it's a really interesting attachment, and Sam's spoken about it, and I've spoken about it before as well, in that the concept of relaxation and happiness comes very closely moulded to food and alcohol. I'm saying food and alcohol because for some people culturally or for religious reasons they don't drink. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, they just attach to something else, and it happens to be usually food, being that that's where they find comfort in, and that would and they attach to both of those. So it would be, hey Jags, so what happens is the blowout happens, and what somebody looks forward to is what they perceive, and I'm going to use that word because I've got a perception on this week as well, what they perceive to be happiness in a future date, right? So I'm going to say that again. What they're doing is they're looking forward to a perceived moment of happiness in a future date that involves food and alcohol, and then what happens is, because they're looking forward to it, I think the dogs are about to kick off actually. 2 seconds. What? Oh yeah. Didn't know about this. Just in case. They didn't for once, which is a miracle. Because I said it, they didn't. So they're looking forward to a date in the future with perceived happiness, and because that perceived happiness involves, there's a, how can I describe it? When clients talk to me, it's like they visualise a moment where they're away. For example, they're out in the sunshine, having a picnic somewhere, on a park, the birds are singing, the picnic has all their favourite food, and with it there's a bottle of Prosecco or something. I'm pretty much describing my perfect weekend here, by the way. However, because they're looking forward to that moment so much, they also start to look forward to what's involved in it, i.e. the alcohol and the food. And it becomes almost, I use this word because it does become a bit ritualistic. There's a lot of words in there, syllables. However, that is what happens actually. Somebody comes so tied into the visual, they're looking forward to it so much because the life they're living inside right now is what it is, right? We're not. If you're Central Leicester, you're not particularly moving around a lot, or even if you're not, I mean, not a hell of people are still socialising. So actually, we bring those two images together so closely, and when it comes to it, it's like we want to hold on to that moment. Hey, Hafsa, even more. So what we're doing is that to hold on to that moment even more, we seem to overindulge in the moment, as in to keep this moment. So I've got to the picnic. There's some crying kids in the corner. I'm going to ignore them. That wasn't in my visual when I was thinking about this during the week. However, I want to hold on to this moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring more food to the picnic, or I'm going to bring more alcohol. I'm going to bring more of the food that I enjoy, because what I want to do is hold on to this moment and make it last. The challenges with that is that the perceived enjoyment of it and the reality of enjoyment of it are very disjointed when you actually speak to clients with their experience afterwards. So most of their, this is really random, right? So stick with me. And this isn't everybody, by the way, so you may want to guess. The perceived enjoyment of the moment is almost more enjoyable than the moment itself, right? So the perceived enjoyment of the moment is more pleasurable than the moment itself, because it might be a wasp, and you're thinking about, like, I'm going to tip stuff over. That wasn't on the visual, you know, when you're visualizing ahead of time, you're like, it's going to be so much fun, it's going to be great, can't wait. And then reality comes, and actually reality, as we know, is not quite the same as perception. And that's where it gets quite disjointed. The thing is that's an example of a weekend where someone might go for a full blowout, or maybe they go out to, like, going out to dinner, or going to a barbecue, where we still could, right, if you're not in Central Leicester, where there's still like an over consumption of food or alcohol. If though, and when speaking to clients when they've been away for a weekend, when they take it to extreme to that degree, as in they keep holding on for a moment as long as possible, the thing is, they come back from the week or weekend and they're not necessarily refreshed. They're not actually feeling recovered. Like a holiday's for rest, or a weekend away is to rest and recuperate for majority of people, not everybody, unless you're a party animal. And what's happening is that people coming back from that time away and not necessarily feeling like they've had relaxation or rest, because they've either overindulged with food and therefore feel sluggish and tired, or if they do drink or have been drinking, the sleep's been quite, as we know, challenged. I've talked about it a lot, and therefore also not feeling like they've actually had time away. So what happens is they come straight back into their everyday life, or back into a semi-lockdown situation, and instead of feeling alleviated from the frustration, actually what's happened is that the frustration increases, because you're adding tide into mix, and I don't know, that didn't feel the way I wanted it to. It wasn't the image I had for that weekend. It wasn't as relaxing, it wasn't as fun, it wasn't as everything else. And then what happens? Somebody goes into a cycle where they then start to plan for the next weekend or for the next trip away, and then essentially they do visualize it even bigger and with more of a blowout. And what then we see, or have seen over the last few weeks, is actually it just creates a cycle. And I'd like to say a spiral. A spiral seems quite intense, but it doesn't go downwards, it goes up, because the behaviours increase. The extremes of behaviours are increasing, where people are looking for that alleviation of frustration, and looking also for the relaxation and rest that they're seeking, at like getting away from where we are right now, and they're not actually experiencing it. And so they're chasing something even harder each time. And it's a tricky one, right? It is a tricky one to balance, to understand what it is that makes the state of happiness, right? Or states, right? I'm talking about states a lot this week. I think next week I'm doing the I've got a state check out. Next Tuesday, I got states. States is a very interesting one, okay? Happiness, I've talked about before, and to recap, happiness is a state. It's a temporary state, and we create it, right? And what people are often looking, so say that the ritualistic sense of going away or having a weekend, often the planning brings that state of happiness. The planning brings, oh, this is going to be so good. It gives them that warm and fuzzy feeling. And that's the again, when you think about it, there's the word, key word, you're thinking yourself happy to some degree, because you're thinking, right, what I want to do is have something that's fun and enjoyable, and this is what it's going to look like. And then the perception of what we attach to that thought, though, alcohol and food, that's where the disjoint happens. And often what we do, Sam and I both do, is and I've talked about the happiness buffet before as an activity, and in these circumstances where somebody is relying heavily on food and alcohol for that release of everyday life, this is a moment of which this is applicable, because ultimately, if you are somebody that enjoys being outdoors and being active, for example, will a whacking hangover and a poor dicky stomach from food support that and help that moment during the day be as much fun if you're away for a weekend? Oh no, not really. However, that's where things get a bit blurred, so there can be a crossing of the two. But again, just to recap, if you haven't watched the happiness buffet, it's really about, like, if I'm thinking, right, what things I'll say to the client, right, okay, rather than use me, I'll say I'll use this client I was talking about this with. So right, write down a list of things that you enjoy doing, right, that isn't to do with food or alcohol. And actually, all the things or actually, so what we did first, we did, what do you like to do on holiday that you enjoy doing that doesn't enjoy food and alcohol? She made a list of things, like reading, going out for walks, spending time with a loved one, right? Guess what? Like all of it, there was about 12 of it, all of it was stuff that could be done now without having to be away. The thing is, she was so attached with, I can only do this stuff when I'm not at home, or I can only do this stuff when I'm away somewhere where I'm not distracted. She'd not given herself enough time or create enough time for herself to see how she could create a state of happiness where she was right now without having to go on massive blowouts with food and alcohol to alleviate that pressure and to relax, unwind, whatever language somebody uses, or to have a great moment with the family. Right? This is another thing we're seeing, even if it's just weekends out at the weekend. I want to have a great time with the family and the kids. So I took them to McDonald's then for a dessert. Now, those kids are already learning that, and I had a discussion about this with another client. Those kids are already learning that pleasure and fun are attached to food. As a family unit, they've already learnt that. And this is where clients as well are falling into that with their families and themselves. They're saying, right, we're going to a joint happiness or a time with the family, a state of happiness, and spending time as a family unit with food. And that is how we celebrate being together, is around the food thing. Don't get me wrong, and like culturally, I think it's important to eat together as a culture and community. However, when we're going out of the way to make sure this is the only time and there's no outside things that you do as a family unit, then that's where it becomes tricky and becomes a belief system for those children when they're older as well. Just as potentially some of our clients currently also did that, right? I know that my parents were very tight. Like, you only went out for someone's birthday and that was it. Yeah, so we went out 3 times a year for dinner. That's it. And this is interesting, right? If I think about it now, I don't think it's culture just because my parents are incredibly tight. As kids though, going out to dinner was a rare and random treat. Like, literally. Like, it was only for birthdays. You only went out for birthday. My birthday was Boxing Day, so we didn't even go out for mine. So that's 3 times a year. 3 times a year we went out to dinner as a family growing up. That is it. Literally it. Not even at Christmas. 3 times a year. And that now, as a culture now, if you think about how we celebrate happiness or a unit with food and how we attach all those things together, it's a monthly event. Or for some families, fair play, like a weekly event. And that's great. The thing is that the trick is diversifying outside of that, so that your own thought process of living for the weekend or for a holiday, I'm not saying eat during the week or anything else. I'm saying that there's other ways to have a great time or create the state of happiness mentally without involving a huge amount of alcohol and food. And if any of you, I would say this, I haven't said this a while, like, because generally, like, these lives in a minute are off the back of client requests, because some clients are going through this and are asking for help to understand it And this is an extreme. This, when I say this behaviour, by the way, is an extreme. It is always an extreme, right? When I say go and blow out, I mean blow out, like a lot of alcohol, a lot of food, and then kind of going into the dredge of lack of recovery during the week, and kind of then building for the next weekend. So if any of you are struggling with this, if your clients, please message me or your coach for some support or just some better understanding, because if you understand your own psychology behind it, you're better able to start to tackle it. And, you know, doing your own happiness buffet as well is a great buffet, is a great way of also seeing how else you might be able to create your state of happiness without the need for extreme amounts of alcohol and food. So recap, I spoke about why it's happening. So a lot of frustration over lockdown or lack of socialising or ability to socialise. So a lot more clients at the minute, or people are kind of going out for either big weekends away, big breaks away, or living for the weekends is the name of this one, right? So they're actually going out for big blowouts at the weekend. They associate the perception, right? So the perception of happiness in the future is almost more enjoyable than the moment itself, because they're looking forward to it so much, and they're attaching a moment of happiness to it so much in their heads. When it comes to it, they're actually overindulging and overdrinking, overeating to keep, almost extend that moment, and to make it like always like being on holiday. Like they want to be on holiday full kilt, because to make up for all the time they haven't almost. So and part of that is that whilst they might be going away to feel relaxed and refreshed, actually they end up coming back not feeling all that refreshed or great, because they've not slept, or the gut's just gone all ape on the amount of food they've had, and all the stuff they probably don't have during the week or when they're at home. It's either small or large weekends. It starts a cycle. It starts a cycle of going back into the grind, or back into everyday life, whatever that is, Monday to Friday, and back into, for some people, still a lockdown situation with added frustration of feeling knackered. And then what we're seeing over the last few weeks is that's just creating a upward spiral, I think I call it, of even more extreme behaviours, which is in people even more knackered. The solution is around the happiness buffet, though. Start to understand what you perceive you can only do while you're away, or only do while you're happy, that is non-related to these things. Because actually, when you start to realise it's not just about those things, you can pull that into your life during the week, and also organise your time away more around those things. Again, though, it's very much on a belief system, and I've talked about is often we create these from a young age, and we create with our children now, that to have a moment of happiness as a family unit, or a break away from life, is to bring food into all of those events, when in fact there's other ways of doing it. It's just culturally and socially we may not be used to them. So that's me done on that one. It's the weekend, so I'm going to go out. No, I'm going out. It's a lot of effort to go out these days, isn't it, really? So I'm back on Monday. Whoo! So I feel like this is the Mel Gibson film, What Women Want. I'm back on Monday, so What Women and Men Want. Dun, da, da, da. Monday at 5, please join me. Until then, enjoy your weekend. Sensibly. Enjoy your weekend, whatever you do, whatever you've got planned. And whenever you've got planned, if you think of this live where you are, and it helps you make some decisions that make you actually do have a more recovering weekend and a balance of enjoyment at the same time, that would be fab. In the meantime, I will see you Monday.